Hello everyone, and welcome to the fifth in our series of webinars exploring areas of the human-animal bond. A word about GoToWebinar for those who may not have used this technology before. Everyone other than our presenter has been muted to ensure that we get a clear presentation without background noise or other distractions. There is a chat box if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, and we invite you to type in any questions you might have for Dave, and he'll answer as many as possible in the time frame that we have for the webinar. Also, if you have any technical issues, please let us know through that chat box, and we'll do our best to walk you through them. I'm immensely pleased today to welcome our presenter, Dave Pauli. Dave is Senior Director of Wildlife Innovations and Response for the Humane Society of the United States. He's also served as Director of the HSUS Northern Rockies Regional Office and other activities with HSUS, and he is active on boards, commissions, task forces, and other entities at local, state, and national levels to protect habitat and species of animals. As those of you who follow him on Facebook know, Dave is involved in rescue, rehabilitation, and humane management of the widest range of critters I've ever seen, from the smallest and youngest to the enormous and ancient, from those with fins, feathers, furs, scales, and other accoutrements. He has more than a quarter-century of experience in animal care and emergency response, and has responded to dozens of earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, forest fires, and other disasters, both nationally and internationally. He has a very keen interest in wildlife, and especially as it interacts with humans, and a keen interest in finding ways to help us coexist. I'm very happy to turn over the podium to Dave Pauli. Dave, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Joan. Wow, that was quite the introduction. I truly appreciate it. Well, good morning, webinar attendees. This webinar is for you, so definitely use the chat feature if you have questions. I'm going to move through a series of slides, and as the course description and Joan touched on, we're trying to celebrate the holiday season, so the care and feeding of reindeer and other wildlife really is a festive way of saying we're going to talk about animal capture, handling, and care. But I can go anywhere that you guys want. I'm going to start off by saying that indeed I have worked with reindeer in Alaska. This particular reindeer in this slide was presented. We removed a tumor from its neck. And this was a dog and cat spay-neuter animal wellness clinic we were holding up in Nome. So true to the theme, I have at least worked at one herd of reindeer for a couple of different things. But we're going to talk about the wide range of wildlife and celebrating many species. So with that, just two credibility slides. One, as Joan mentioned, I have a pretty wide depth and breadth. I had my own wildlife damage control business in Madison, Wisconsin called Humane Animal Controls for 4 years, from '79 to '83, and then was the local director here for the Billings Animal Shelter for the Billings Police Department, and then ran a private humane society in Pasco, Washington, the Tri-Cities, Washington, for 3 years before joining the HSUS just a little over 20 years ago. But I've been messing with wildlife for almost, probably closer to 39 years. I put 35 down because I started doing animal structural exclusion on churches and buildings with pigeons before I had my driver's license. So I was about 14 the first time I actually got paid to help solve a wildlife issue. I have been fortunate to work with great people and have contributed to books like Wild Neighbors, and I did the small animal handling chapter for the NACA training guide. So I've been doing this quite a bit of time, and the whole purpose is to bring some tips and tricks and techniques. That's really my goal for today, to give everybody 4 or 5 unique outlooks at wildlife handling or capture. And that really, I say on here, I am a capture specialist. I'm not a DVM. I'm not a biologist. But I've worked with some great ones like Mark Johnson and Eric Davis and Eric Jane, tons of good biologists. And I learned something from each one. In this frame, the picture on the left is one of many pelicans that we've rescued after hurricanes, just beat up from the winds, high winds and storm surge. And the lesson I learned here is never put more than one pelican in an airline crate in your hotel room, because after you have 4 or 5 of them in your hotel room overnight, you can't breathe the air. So you have to have them outside the hotel room. But they're great birds, and we do a lot of that sort of stuff. The picture on the right is a swift fox from Nebraska, and I worked with a tribal entity to capture and process foxes and move them to the Lower Brule Reservation in South Dakota. And the lesson learned on that project was they could process a fox from the trap to the release pen in about 3 minutes. And that short time span really reduces stress. So that's the kind of stuff I'm going to talk about today is how can do we have to handle wildlife? How do we handle it? And where do we go from there? So before I give you any more background, I am not a biologist, but I will throughout this webinar make some comments starting with biologically speaking, just to prove that I'm just a layman. So biologically speaking, we all know that all birds start with an egg. And after they hatch, they're called hatchlings, then they're called nestlings, then they're called fledglings. But, and some have special names like ducklings, goslings, cygnets. But after 5 days, there's a term that's universally accepted for all birds. So after they're 5 days old, there's a universal term. And I just want you to mentally think about that. And my non-biological answer is the term universally accepted after 5 days old is 6 days old. Okay, so now I've demonstrated I'm not a biologist. We're going to move on and look at a couple of archival shots. Well, I have done, this just shows 50 projects on more than 30 species. There's a wolverine trap in Yellowstone in Lamar Valley. And in fact, Joan and I went and visited this last year. And wolf, this one happens to be either the California Wolf Center or Zoo Montana. I don't remember, but the take-home message from this picture is if you look at the muzzle that's on the wolf, this is a standard dog muzzle that Dr. Mark Johnson had changed to include an eye cover. So it's got the eye cover to reduce the stress, and then it's got a 4-foot-long leash. So it's an adaptation of equipment that allows you to work with an animal like this, do a chemical reversal, and then get safely away before you pop the muzzle and the head cover off. So just little tricks like that really work in the field. I'm going to give you a few seconds to mentally identify these species that I've worked with, but I just have to tell you that I am just excited that I worked with so many different species, and just this year I've worked with jaguars, black-footed ferrets, swans, prairie dogs, ospreys, did an osprey banding project, gopher tortoises, beaver, white-tailed deer. So I get the diversity of jumping from species to species, and each one of those species teaches me something else, some other trick, some other capture technique. So now I'm going to go to these slides, and most of you have already identified the upper left-hand picture as a tiger, but you get bonus points if you identify it as a Sumatran tiger. And that tiger lived at my house for 6 weeks, not in my house, at my house in an outdoor cage for 6 weeks while we were trying to find it a permanent home. It was the victim of a photo shoot operation. And I learned a lot about big cats from that. In the lower left hand, I'm wondering how many of you can identify that as a Patagonian cavy. You know, we took 16 Patagonian cavies from a sanctuary gone bad in northwest Montana. And it's a South American rodent that people had living in one of the coldest spots on Earth. And they now were redistributed to Florida and Louisiana to sanctuaries where they're living out. The lower right-hand picture, it was just a couple weeks ago, and that is a trumpeter swan cygnet that is going to be released next year as part of a swan species survival plan program. And then I'm really wondering how many of you can guess the bird in the upper right-hand corner. That is a nestling, and it's a nestling that looks aggressive, but it actually is not aggressive. That's a great blue heron nestling, and they're quite a bit less attractive when they're this young than when they're adults. But those are the types of species that we get to work with, and lessons learned on each of those. Okay, then just a couple archival shots. Lessons learned again. In 1979, I started my wildlife business, and I took over 300 baby raccoons every spring out of chimneys. And truly my lesson learned there was that sometimes capture and translocation or capture and relocation is not the best choice for wildlife. If I had to do this all over again, I would not have just taken all those raccoons and released them on state public lands. We would have probably done a much different protocol. But you have to learn those lessons. The picture on the right, from 1985 to 1988, I live trapped over 2,000 striped skunks. And about 40 of those skunks, we implanted Norplant birth control in and radio collared and followed for a year to see if birth control worked in skunks, so that the state would not have to use strychnine eggs. So we were looking for non-lethal alternatives to strychnine eggs. And we found indeed in those 3 years that birth control works for skunks, but the agricultural interests were not quite ready to do skunk birth control. They much preferred a lethal program. But the technology was there and we could have made it happen. Now I'm going to leapfrog about 20 years, 25 years. This is last week actually, and this is Lake Elmo in Billings, where these ponds freeze solid, and we have to go out almost every year and capture the domestic ducks that people turn loose because they do not survive when the ponds freeze totally solid. And next slide is this is last week, catching of these domestic ducks and rehoming them. And we always have an educational component. In fact, this year it will be in the Billings Gazette and on the Billings Gazette website, telling people that they should not release domestic ducks on these ponds. And usually it works for a year or two, and then we have to redo the educational program. But lots of energy is spent trying to recover domestic animals, or technically feral animals, that have been released into the wild. Okay. I guess, biologically speaking, before I enter this webinar session, is that I heard that a crow has one less pinion feather, wing feather, one less pinion feather than ravens. So how do you guys think that biologists tell the difference between a crow and a raven? Well, the answer is it's just a matter of opinion. Second one I won't do too many of those to you, but I'm just trying to keep things light. Well, let me go back and just talk about, really today we're just talking about considering options for handling wildlife, using good protocols, what is humane, and some practical applications to your life and to your wildlife. And of course, answering your questions. So I'll keep watching that chat screen and see if you're adding any questions. But for now, I'll move on to the 8 things I want to touch on today. And these are from a list of about 25, but I pulled off 8 that I thought were pretty critical to having good wildlife programs. So the first one is, and I will go into probably each of these a little more in depth, but considering options. Is capture and handling actually necessary? And I often say, in general, 50% of the time that an agency or an individual captures an animal, it's an unnecessary capture, and it could be handled other ways. So we'll give some examples of that. The ancient question of what is humane, we could spend a webinar just on that, but we're just going to give a couple of perspectives of what's humane wildlife handling and what's not. The golden rule in wildlife handling is the least amount of restraint necessary. Use the least amount, start at the lower end of the continuum, and then work your way up. But truly, people get in trouble with wildlife when they try to over-restrain it. Going along with that, allowing the animal choices. And that I'll explain using canid behavior as an example, but it really applies to all species. We're going to spend a couple of minutes on being creative and thinking outside of the litter or nesting box. And we'll talk about live traps as an example there, maybe netting. And then develop long-term goals. This is maybe the hardest one because, like I say, I participated in over 50 field projects, and I bet at least half of those, when we got into it, there was not a long-term goal. There was just a goal to solve the symptoms, to help those particular animals, but not to stop a reoccurrence or not to solve the underlying problem. And then the last two are really more esoteric and plan for the worst case scenario. So I always use the term of Mr. Murphy will show up, and things that can go wrong will go wrong. But not if you plan for the worst case scenario. So on these wildlife projects, if you work with wildlife long enough, you're going to have a fatality in the field, you're going to have an unexpected behavior in the field, and you're probably going to have injury in the field. I'll cite one injury example now. I was removing raccoons from a chimney in Madison, Wisconsin. And I had a system where I would blow the female raccoon up the chimney with forced air, just force her to go up into a trap on top of the chimney. And then I would take the babies out on the bottom from the smoke shelf by hand and then reunite them in a release cage and take them to a site. But in this particular case, I caught Mama on the roof. I confirmed from outside that she was in the trap. And then I started to pull babies out of the smoke shelf. And I had a whole host of women. This was right about 2 houses down from the governor's mansion in a very pristine house. And the homeowner had invited some of her card-playing friends along, the bridge club. And I was explaining to them that I'm going to reach up in the chimney, grab a baby, I'm going to pull it out. It may shoot a stream of urine, it may grow. And then I put him into this little capture pen that I have that opens with the door. And I did that with 2 babies. And everything was to script. And then I put my arm up there, and ouch, something bit into the fatty flesh part of my hand, just above the wrist. And this was with another mother raccoon. So they were either sister raccoons or just 2 females that decided to den together. And this raccoon tried to pull me up the chimney. So as my head is hitting the side of the chimney, the woman says to me, "Now, is this normal?" And all I could say was, "No, it's not." And finally, the raccoon let go of my hand, and I pulled it out, and it wasn't a urine stream, it was a blood stream. And I learned a huge lesson. Just don't assume, there's only one raccoon up the chimney, and don't assume. I mean, I probably should have had bite gloves on, but I thought they were just going to be babies. So you learn something that was a great lesson for planning for the worst case scenario, because I had no first aid kit. I had no expectation of being bitten, but it does happen. The last one, of course, is maximize the gift. And this is really a Mark Johnson mantra, a good veterinarian friend of mine who was the lead veterinarian for the wolf reintroduction in '95 in Yellowstone. And he strongly professes that every time we touch an animal, touch a wild animal, it is a gift, and we have to maximize that gift and get the most out of it and honor that animal. So I'll talk about that just a tad. So first of all, is capture and handling necessary? I actually do another program called Moose Problem or Apple Problem, because I find that most ungulate, most deer, moose issues are not a moose or deer problem. They are a attractant problem. People have apples under the tree they don't rake up, they overfeed the bird feeders, they have a heated pool when they want water, and it really becomes education about removing attractants and education about habitat modification. In this case, you'll see, now that moose could jump over that 3-foot chain link fence, but they're not going to expend energy unless there's something worth coming to see. So just putting a gate, a 4-foot gate over the sidewalk might be enough to keep a moose from coming into this yard. So we talk about that. I also have public education. I'm going to give you a classic example from just maybe 10 days ago. I had a woman in Billings call me about 8 o'clock at night, and she had a bobcat on her porch, and she was hoping that I would come out and remove the bobcat. And I said, "Well, where is it again?" She said, "On the porch. She's smelling around our dog and cat bowls." I said, "So you own dogs and cats?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, compared to your dogs and cats, how healthy does this bobcat look? I mean, is its coat clean? Are its eyes bright? Does it look like a normal, healthy bobcat?" And she said, well, yes, it looks great. In fact, it looks really nice. And then I said, well, then I have another 2 weird questions for you. Do you know what the population of Billings is? And she said, the population of Billings? Well, I think it's like 90,000. And I said, well, that's close enough. So my last question is, how many people in Billings, Montana, right now, are fortunate to look out their window and see a beautiful bobcat sitting on their porch? And she was silent and then said, well, not very many. I said, exactly. So what I think you should do is hang up the phone for me and go get a camera and take a picture of that bobcat and realize how fortunate you are to have a bobcat on your deck. And then we went on to talk about removing her dog food and cat bowls, not feeding at night, feeding the animals indoors, and some of the things. But in the meantime, just treasure the fact that you had this, that you thought you had a negative situation and you actually have a positive interaction with wildlife that you should celebrate. Other things, exclusion and code and law revisions. And by code and law revisions, I'm talking about things like no feeding of wildlife in parks, no abandonment. Make sure that many state abandonment laws only cover domestic animals, i.e. dogs and cats, sometimes horses, but they really should cover rabbits, chickens, ducks, any domestic species that people can release in the wild but shouldn't. So you might want to check and make sure that your laws and codes are up to snuff. So next, I saw, I coexisted. That's actually my Facebook model, and coexistence is really the key to getting along with wildlife. On the right-hand picture, we have a beaver deceiver, a device that is built at Skip Lyle. Skip is the muscular gentleman with the chainsaw. That's me in the center doing what I normally do. I think a few minutes before this I was seeing if I could catch any crayfish while Skip was working. But this device is a beaver deceiver. It's a trapezoidal-shaped device that, rather than kill beaver who come in and dam up culverts and then kill them the next year when more come in and then kill them the next year, you can coexist with beaver by building devices like this that allow the beavers to be there but prevent the water damage from flooding and that sort of things. And there's great information on the internet about beaver deceivers and beaver water flow devices. But in most cases, we can live with beaver instead of thinking they're a negative purge. The other picture is just a couple weeks ago, and maybe 5 weeks ago. I was in Miles City, Montana, trying to catch a feral macaque monkey that was loose. And this is at a fishing access where I had set up some trail cameras. And this bull snake, adult bull snake, was hanging around the fishing access. And there was actually some kids talking about stoning the snake. And so I went over and picked it up and just transported it 250 feet away, which 250 feet to a bull snake is a third or a quarter of its home range. So I got it to safety to the side and then just talked to the kids about, you know, that snake does so many good things. We should really celebrate that he's out there. And I don't know if I reached the kids. I don't know. But at least they had an opportunity to think about the first thing that you do when you see a snake is not pick up a rock. And that's you know, if we can reach a 14, 15-year-old kid, and we could change their behavior for the rest of their lives. So that's pretty cool. Okay, and part of the non-capture thing is if you care, leave them there. And this is being accepted more and more places. The picture on the left is a boa constrictor baby. This is about 4 or 5 weeks old also. I was in the Turks Caicos Islands training government employees on feral dog capture, and I was preparing a bed for my trap and found this little newborn boa constrictor. And I went to release it, and one of the people approached me and said, well, no, I'll take it home and put it in an aquarium. And I got to go into my little soapbox about, no, this wildlife belongs in the wild. This is not a science experiment. This is a very cool species that we just need to put back in the environment. The picture on the right, I have the upper picture. I have about 300 of those pictures because every spring people go out to mow their lawn, and they see a little depression in their lawn, and they see baby cottontail rabbits like this, and they think they need to be rescued, and they bring them into the house, and they put them in a shoebox, and they go on the internet, and they find out how they're supposed to take care of them, and they try to take care of them, and then when they're failing at health, they call me or a rehab center and try to get help. And the whole message is, if you care, leave them there. Mom is watching. Mom will take care of these bunnies. That this is a case that does not need intervention. The same is true. This is a kestrel nestling, and it did fall out of the nest. And many people believe the scent of humans is somehow going to taint a mother animal from taking her baby back. And there may be some species where they'd be less accepting. But the maternal bond is one of the strongest bonds out there. And I have had animals of every species except babies from me, some that have been gone 72 hours with some species, ducklings in particular. A mallard hen will accept her babies back a week later if you can get them back to her. So, you know, if you care, leave them there. And if we're educating the public, don't take them into your home. But if you do, call somebody within the first 24 hours, because that's a critical time span. So what is humane? We could spend a lot of time on this. I use two litmus tests. First of all, if your technique looks bad and feels bad, it probably is. And I used to just say looks or feels bad, but there are many situations where I think it really needs to be both. And as an example, this is the Sri Lanka after the tsunami. And I was part of a 5-person, 5-country team that went there to capture dogs. And I took some live traps, but the preferred alternative for catching dogs there, because they hid under cars, was to use these nets. And these were the nets from the Pauli Street Dog Foundation. And we would net the dog and then spin the net cover and encapsulate the dog in the net. And then I can show you here this is the handle for the net, and it goes into this little T-post, and then you pop it out and you transport the dog like this. Now this may look not comfortable to some of you, and we did try putting a towel over the top of the net as a head cover to calm them down, but it's 108 degrees there, and the head cover towel really did not help the situation. We had much better circulation just transporting like this. I grew to like this. I think it still doesn't look good, but it feels pretty good that that dog has a physical capture. So you physically caught him, and he has psychological restraint. He knows that he's not going anywhere, and so he just relaxes and allows you to transport him. So, you know, it has to look bad and feel bad. But the real bottom line is that if the protocol puts the animal at risk of severe injury or death, don't do it. And if you're in a program and you're having animals die, stop. Stop and reevaluate. Try to figure out what is going wrong. And we have had a couple of those. We had a dog, a spay-neuter clinic for 300 dogs in a hoarder case in Alaska, where the hoarder fed 2 pens of the dogs 100% lard, or not lard, but the grease from like a Kentucky Fried Chicken that the restaurant stored in a barrel. So it's pretty close to lard. It's deep fat fry or grease. And that was their primary diet. And those dogs developed a blood issue where they would bleed profusely from almost any situation. So we couldn't spay or neuter any of those dogs. We had to hold off until we could get them on a different diet and see if that. So it really perplexed the vets. But the vets quit after 2 or 3 dogs, and we found out all the dogs from that pen were profuse bleeders. So it's pretty important to not feel committed that you have to finish a project. You have to act in the best interest of the dogs, or excuse me, the species. Okay, so minimizing stress is good for all. I'm just going to do a couple slides on stress, because stress is the key issue that wildlife projects fail. And many people that come into this business come from a domestic animal background, and domestic animals are not wildlife. They react, they have a stronger fight-flight distance, they react differently, they can go from defensive to aggressive in 10 seconds or 1/10 of a second. So we want to avoid, the technical term is capture myopathy, but it means they die from stress. So stress is a condition of time, the distance and space, meaning how far from the animal, the animal's perception. Forget your perception about the animal. Concentrate on the animal's perception of you, the animal's senses, whether they have heightened hearing, heightened vision, heightened smell. Definitely have to consider the species. Protocol for water shrews is substantially different from protocol for another species, like, a shark. A program for a feral dog is definitely different than a protocol for coyote. So you have to do that. Truly, I think capture stress and poor planning are the two major reasons that animals die in a project. Okay, so stress is a condition of time, and I have a biologist friend who says it's really about intensity versus spatiality. And what they mean, truly, is that you have two options. Like this example is prairie dogs. So we go out and live trap prairie dogs from a place that's going to be poisoned, and we will catch somewhere between 75 and 93% of the prairie dogs in pre-bedded live traps, which leaves, let's just say 10% of the prairie dogs will not be trapped. So the last day of the trapping, when they're going to come in the next day and start poisoning, we do a water flushing, a water evacuation. And it's actually not water, it's a suds solution. It's basically Dawn dish detergent and water turned into a foam. And we put the foam down the burrows, and the prairie dogs come up into the foam, and we hand capture them. So you have two distinct things. You have a trapping program where the animal has minor stress because he's in a trap, the trap is covered. He may be in your process for 48 hours because you're holding him to get enough animals to move. And then you have the rapid flushing where the animal is highly stressed for 4 to 8 hours, so 10% of the time. But there's different levels because the flushed ones do not have to be treated for parasites because the soap takes care of fleas and ticks. The other ones have to go through a process. But one group is stressed intensely for a short period of time, one group is stressed less intensely but for a longer period of time. And you just have to weigh that out. Definitely, I think the preferred is lower stress over more time, but sometimes these other prairie dogs would be dead if we didn't intervene. That top picture, by the way, is my my oldest daughter, Margaret. So Maggie is now a junior in college. She's a bit younger here, but both my daughters are excellent field hands. Okay, so so time is a key issue. Plan ahead, practice the process, and cut time wasters. If you can process an animal, meaning TPRs, temperature, pulse, respiration, vaccinations, parasite control, microchipping, all the things that are in your process, if you can do it in 10 minutes routinely, if you practice it, you can get that down to 2 to 3 minutes. And that 7-minute difference is huge for wildlife. Okay, size is a perception, not reality. I always love this slide on the left, and look how taut that rope is. And the dog is between this large blue giant and somebody with a camera. And they're about 10 seconds away from a fear bite in this situation. But look at the animal control officer. I'm not sure why he has his arms extended, and I'm not sure why they chose to put a big yellow badge in the middle of a dark blue uniform, but it's all intimidating. So to this dog, he is gigantic. And the animal control officer could minimize himself by turning sideways, by kneeling down, by just bringing his arms into his body, by being much more low, slow, and soft. And there's nothing, you'll hear more about that, there's nothing low, slow, and soft about this picture. And when we're dealing with wildlife outside, you need to know that you are as tall as your shadow. So if you're standing 18 feet from a skunk and the sun is behind you and your shadow touches the skunk at 18 feet, he thinks you're 18 feet tall. It's not your body size, it's the shadow is an extension of your body. So now we go to least amount of restraint necessary, and truly we're talking not just about physical restraint. We're talking about psychological restraint. We're talking about the animal's fight-flight distance. The picture on the left is a feral pig, and he's taking a standard position. I'm about at the edge of his fight-flight distance, and he's trying to decide. He probably already knows he can't flee, so he's assumed the position of, okay, come closer, because I am a feral pig. So he's having psychological restraint right now because he's not pushing against the pin, and that is adjusted as you get closer. So you have to, it'd be nice to have a tarp behind this that you could just pull a rope and pull the tarp over and reduce his stress. It'd be nice to send one person over there with something to cover this trap. But the reality in most of these cases is 4 or 5 or 6 people all crowd around this trap to look at the pig, and he goes into capture myopathy. I mean, he's freaking out. So you just have to think about that. How can you reduce stress with the least amount of psychological restraint? The picture on the right is a tiger at Zoo, Montana. Her name was Nadia, or Nadja, and Nadia had a throat infection, and we had to chemically immobilize her 7 times about every 6 or 8 days and stomach tube feed her. And this is about 4 or 5 times after we gotten pretty good at the protocol. But after the 3rd event, we came into the pen with our dart guns and blow guns, and Nadia went over in the corner of the cage and laid down and basically faked like she was already immobilized. So that just tells you the intelligence of these animals. In this case, we are done with the stomach tube feeding, and the gentleman to my left is Mark, and he is just restraining her with a head cover and gentle pressure on her head. I'm giving her a final bit of water under the skin, and then we back out. This is a few years ago, and if we did this protocol today, I would have a 3rd person in the room with a Y pole, a pole that could control her head or neck, so we could all get out safely after she's reversed. But least amount of restraint necessary. If you put hobbles on this cat, if you lay something heavy over the cat, that extra restraint is going to backfire. It's going to cause you some problems because wildlife will fight restraints. Okay. This is the continuum of restraint. My favorite, of course, is at the top, no capture. My least favorite at the bottom, but it is a continuum of restraint. So we have Y-pole restraint, hand capture or towel capture, live trap, net gun, chemical immobilization, and lethal firearms. Many of my colleagues in this business start at chemical immobilization because they have the equipment, they have the drugs, they have the training, and just like on Wild Kingdom, they think it may work very well. But the reality is, if you can handle the animal with the ones above that, and this is a continuum, so it starts nowhere, it's a circle. You reduce the stress for the animal, and the animal has a more positive interaction, and you're not going to have problems. So think about the continuum. Think about, do I need to capture it all? We're going to show a slide of wolves, and we used to use nets on wolves, and now we just use Y-pole. And I'll give an example, and we can talk about how that greatly reduces stress by starting higher on the continuum of restraint. Here's the slide. So allow the animal choices. This is when we used to net wolves, California Wolf Center, all the zoos, Beartooth Nature Center, and we would net them simply to draw blood, to vaccinate, to do their annual health checkups. And you have to give the wolf the opportunity to make some choices. In this case, if I want to get the wolf back in the corner, to have him back up in the corner, we have a little dance. So if the wolf tries to step forward and go the way I don't want him, I step forward a little bit and put some pressure on. So we have psychological restraint. If the wolf backs up a step and goes the way I'd like him to go, I step back a step. I am thanking him. I am saying, all right, you go back, I'll go back, and the stress is reduced. Then I'll wait a bit, then I'll step forward. At that point, he has to decide, okay, do I reduce the stress and go backward, or do I step forward? And hopefully after a couple of these dances, he will just keep learning to step back, and I will honor when he steps back, I'll step back, and then I'll step forward, and he'll step back, and eventually the wolf is in the corner waiting to see what happens. At that point, we have to work it out as to, can I use a Y-pole? Do I have to use a net? Does he have to be immobilized? But in most cases, animals figure out that you are not being offensive. You're being neutral. And they allow you to just put a Y pole up, hold them against the pen, and do whatever procedure you need. So you need to reward good decisions. I have down on here low, slow, soft. Low, slow, soft, I really learned trapping skunks, because when you trap a couple of thousand skunks and they're in a live trap and you have to get up and vaccinate them with a little 3-foot pole syringe, you learn that, you know, watch where your shadow is, move in slow. It's okay to talk baby talk. It's okay. It doesn't really matter what you say. Humans like to say things like, it's okay, baby. That's all right. Nobody's going to hurt you. Yeah, everything's fine. But I could say the same thing. I could say, watermelon. Oh, watermelon. Oh, watermelon. It's not the message. It's the tone and the volume. So, but most of us do feel better saying, yeah, baby. Oh, you are beautiful. Oh, yeah. And then you get in up to 3 feet. And when the skunk looks at you, both her nose and her anus are looking at you at the same time. And that's when she's ready to cut loose. And you learn to relax. And you just put your head down, and you give the skunk a minute. And her, she actually sprays from 2 little ducts on either side of her anus. And they become erect, look like 2 little penises on either side of her anus pointed at your nose. So if you know, if you're close enough to see that, you know what low, slow, and soft means. Because if you are low, slow, and soft, they relax and come back into her body. And then you know it's safe. It's safe to dart her. So, so reward good decisions. Be low, slow, and soft. Okay, next, be creative. Think outside the nest box. This is a standard technique I use for feral chickens. What do chickens want in life? They want to be able to dust, they want to catch insects, and they want to have good nesting capabilities. So I have, no, not one, but I had 2 of these mounted to plywood sheets. And I will take them out into areas that have feral chickens, and we'll set them up, and we'll set up a grit bowl, and we'll set up a water bowl, and we'll put fresh hay and straw, and we'll make it available and give the birds 2 weeks to start nesting. Then we can have a rope rigged up to this, and either in the middle of the day or at night, we can pull the rope and capture the chickens, and it's all low stress. Then we take the birds out, and we put the bars back down, and we can clean out an area of feral chickens using their hardwired need to roost and nest. And you know, no chasing them up in trees, no hooking them by the legs. It's just a creative way to catch chickens, and it works very, very well. You know, I think you know, other examples. Well, we're going to cover a couple of examples on the next slide. These are just new ideas and concepts. Some of them aren't so new, but I do a lot of feral cat work, and it always amazes me when I show up that the trapping team has one flavor of cat food, fish flavored, salmon flavored cat food, and that's what they use for 100% of the traps. I use bait, food bait, in about 50% of my traps. I use visual bait, just a feather, maybe a little electronic. I have electronic squeakers that go in a coffee can underneath the trap and just roll around, so an auditory bait. In the winter, when I'm doing winter projects, I use pseudo rats, which means I take rat dropping or gerbil dropping or mice dropping, and I sprinkle it on one of those 24-hour hand warmers, one of those disposable hand warmers, sprinkle it on there, and then put rubber bands and duct tape around it and bury it under the trap. And it gives off the scent of a warm living rodent. And cats can't pass up auditory and olfactory lures, and they work actually much better than food lures. I also have the shelter here in town save me cat and heat litter, and so I'll use queen and heat litter, and that will catch all the big toms. And it's just, you're just looking at your animal that you're going to work with and recognizing what its strengths are, what its senses are, and then using those to your advantage. Bird capture, just a couple more examples. I'm working with a gal right now trying to catch a couple of guinea fowl. And there's tunnel traps, which basically used to be called stovepipe traps. And all the game birds, pheasants, chickens, turkeys, peacocks, they cannot walk backwards. Their bodies are so designed that they can only walk forwards. So a tunnel trap, you just allow the animal to make the right size of tunnel, and you allow the animal to eat into the trap, and when it gets in far enough, it cannot turn around, and the other end is closed, of course. And you do have to monitor those because predators could get in there too, but you catch lots of birds using no fancy trap, just some chicken wire rolled into a tunnel. Night ops, do a lot of animals with night ops. We're doing a project in Bahamas, January 9th to the 16th, and we're going to be trapping night ops because you can use spotlights, find the dog's eye, set the traps up, and catch them night, and it calms them down. They're much more comfortable. And using visual and audio cues. Again, most birds eat by sight, survive by sight. So you can do a number of things. The picture actually shows a falcon trap. In the oil spill last year in Yellowstone, we were trying to capture a hawk, a Cooper's hawk, and they wanted to put a live sparrow in this trap to have the Cooper's hawk come down, and I put in an electronic sparrow, a little bird sparrow, and a chirper, and that way you didn't have to use live bait. You could use electronics and still capture stuff. Okay, develop long-term solutions. That's really the heart of it. Doesn't do us any good to not have a long-term solution. So you want to solve the problem. Plan for worst-case scenario. Definitely, we talked about this. If you're prepared for field euthanasia and you're prepared for emergency triage, you're going to be in good shape. You want to address Murphy's Law. Things will go wrong. You want to be redundant, like we're doing this nocturnal night ops thing for dogs. So we are going to have tons of batteries, tons of lights, tons of first aid kits, because at night you get scratches and cuts you won't get in the daytime. And you should have 3 of everything. You have to have a DVM involved. You have to plan the work and then work the plan. But basically, you know, be prepared for everything. Maximize the gift. I don't know how to express this other than these 3 things. Live in today, but think about tomorrow. I was doing a project. I'm actually working on a wolverine trap. And to work on a wolverine trap, an alternative wolverine trap, I'm using a Tasmanian devil trap from Australia. So I got a devil trap from Australia that's built to hold Tazes, and I'm retrofitting it to hold wolverines. But I can't field test it on wolverines, so I have to field test it on badgers. So I'm using this trap to just capture and release a couple of badgers, put up a videotape camera to see how they react to the trap. But before I did that, I did an internet search to see who's doing badger research. And I found a gal in Wisconsin and a person in either Arizona or New Mexico who are very thankful that I'm going to be able to take DNA samples from these animals, take pictures of these animals, weigh the animal, and then send that data to them. So I'm using the animal to prepare a better wolverine trap, but to maximize the gift, I am also allowing him to contribute to some other positive science. And they'll also they'll have a good meal in the trap, they'll have a good meal after I'll leave them, and hopefully the wolverine is having a positive experience through the whole thing. So see if your experience can help others, and consider marking, tagging the animal. A couple more slides. Protect people from wildlife and wildlife from people. My other rule of thumb is always act in the animal's best interest. If you keep that as a guideline, you can never go too far wrong. You do have to address the public health and safety issues, which is usually what funds projects and what driving projects, but you can still do that by acting in the animal's best interest. And then always use this project as an opportunity to educate the public and prevent reoccurrence. So here's my summaries. Consider the alternatives, and do not be upset if, when you consider the alternatives, the primary alternative is do not take action. We don't need to do anything. We need to do something else. We need to exclude. If it looks and feels bad, it probably is, and you should reevaluate the protocol. Always use the least amount of restraint necessary. To people of my own gender, that is sometimes hard because we feel we have to dominate an animal to get control. But it's totally the opposite. We'll have much better success if we leave the domination out of the picture and handle animals lowly, slowly, and softly. Let the animal make some decisions, but more importantly, reward them. Reward them when they're making good decisions. Plan for worst case scenario, and know that, you know, every event is a chance for education. So I'm going to close and just say that, you know, the beauty from my career in wildlife handling and animal handling is I've got to work with really cool people in really cool situations. And I'm still a student. I learn something on every job. In the upper left-hand corner is the Philippines project, and that's Dr. Barry Kellogg looking like Santa Claus there in the corner, a great wildlife veterinarian, and of course, all my friends from the Philippines. In the right-hand side is Senator John Ensign, and this is Katrina. I was in Katrina 51 days, about 50 days too long, but that's another story. But we did some great work there, and actually that's Laura Maloney, who was with the Louisiana SPCA at that time and now with HSUS. The lower picture is visiting one of Ted Turner's ranches. Ted is a great prairie dog protector, and we've done a couple of projects with him. And in the lower left, one of my favorite pictures of all time is from Sri Lanka, and this is a family that adopted me. I was there 10 days. 3 families lived in one house. They had nothing, and yet they shared their rice with me and welcomed me into their house, and just a truly, truly rewarding experience of good projects leading to good people. So I do want to tell you that biologically speaking, you know, this is not a true wildlife issue, but the Montana legislature this year starts the session in January, and there is a proposed law to ban the big round bales of hay, those big round bales. And I will be up there to oppose it, but the ranchers have a strong lobby, and I know, somebody's saying, well, why would they want to ban the big round bales? Well, that's easy. The ranchers think the cows can't get a square meal. Okay, with that, I want to thank you guys for joining this HSUS webinar. Please follow the Wildlife Innovations and Response team. If you want to be added to our project volunteer or training list, you can contact Colin Berry at cberry@hsus.org. Colin just delivered a beautiful baby girl a few days ago, so we don't want to bother her or expect fast response. But she is my deputy director, and we work on all these projects together. My email, of course, is dpauli@hsus.org, and I would definitely look forward to hearing from you and working with you. The picture, of course, this is a Katrina picture because the winds were so strong at Katrina. Oh, never mind, a little Photoshop work. And with that, I would be open to any questions.
Thank you, Dave, so much. There are a couple of questions, and I'd be happy to field them for you. Early on, when you were talking about your experiences in Wisconsin with relocation of raccoons, a question came in. Someone in Michigan is having an issue with raccoons with their bird feeders. She wants to find a humane solution, but her neighbor is pretty much, they want to kill the raccoons. And she recognizes that relocating them is not the best option, but can you offer an alternative? Can you offer another suggestion?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would have the caller also email me, because I do have a raccoon primer that really goes through the whole biology and all the options for raccoon control. But this is one of those exclusionary things. I mean, is it the type of bird food? Is it the easy access to the bird feeder? Is it the fact, I mean, it's a learned behavior. The raccoon has discovered that this is a good food source and an easy food source. So we need to break that link. It could be just changing the bird food. It could be, I never say raccoon-proof a feeder because they carry grapple hooks under their tail and learn how to swing from tree branches and everything else. But you can make it more difficult for the raccoons to access the food. It might be changing the feeding times, and that. It may be hazing. You might have to reach the point where you're throwing tennis balls at the raccoon and letting them know that, you know, this behavior is not accepted, some hazing technique. But usually it's some combination of the three: change of food, making access more hard, And you know, I would even turn the hose on a raccoon and drive it away from the feeder just to let it know that's not a good thing. So some combination of those should help solve it without removing the raccoon from the ecosystem.
Great, thank you. And for the participant, if you want to contact Dave, it is dpauli@hsus.org. The other question from one of our participants, other than using electric fences, can you suggest a way to protect beehives from bears?
Oh, wow. Well, I would be interested in hearing the concern about the electric fences, because that is the state of the art for apiaries to keep them out. But again, it could be, I mean, there would have to be some deterrent to the bear. So I mean, that you could do it with sound. You could use the gas cannons. You could use dog scent. But honey is a great reward to a bear and a great strong attractant. I can check the research and see if anybody has anything new. And you also can do fencing that isn't as hard, isn't as shocking, literally, as some other fences. So there is a lot of good stuff coming out. We're actually looking at using electricity to bear-proof chicken coops, because with the backyard chicken craze, there are a lot of situations where bears are coming in chickens. So, but I would like to hear the primary concern about the fencing, because to a bear, that is a deterrent and not a life-changing fact.
Okay. Another question, are you considering writing a book?
Ha! Yes, actually, I even have a title for it, and it stems from a trip to Alaska, where we met some Alaska natives back in the bush, way up above the North Slope. And the gal said to me, I was telling some stories, and the gal said to me, "Do you know what you are?" And I said, I'm not sure I want to ask. She said, "You are a professional tag-along." And that's true, because I don't design these projects, but I do tag along with great people. So my book title is Tales of a Tag-Along, but I have not actually contributed anything to it other than a few photographs and a file.
That's a book that I would definitely buy, and I think a lot of other people would as well.
Thank you, Johnny.
Are there any other questions out there? I'm not seeing any in the chat box. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for this very fun and informative webinar by Dave Pauli. In the next day or so, we'll send out a link to the recording as well as information about upcoming webinars. I hope you'll share the link with others who may not have been able to join us today. Please save the date for our next webinar, which is going to be January 22nd, 2013. At 1 p.m. Eastern. This will be with Hillary Hager, a specialist in volunteering, and she'll be talking about opportunities to volunteer on behalf of animals. So watch your emails for that follow-up. Thank you again, Dave Pauli. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate it, and have a safe and happy holiday, everyone.
Ho, ho, ho!
Watch for those reindeer.
Thanks, Joan. Thank you, HSU.